A good question would be, where could you get guitar lessons in the 19th, early 20th century? People like Fernando Sor, Matteo Carcassi, Dionisio Aguado, they all had students. I'm going to start talking about Antonio Cano and his son teach at the Francisco Gonzalez Guitar Workshop. In 1865, Francisco Gonzalez received a medal, an award at the Paris Exposition that went on for months, with people contributing from all countries, all products. The concert artist Antonio Cano, who was a pupil of Dionisio Aguado, he published his method book in 1852, and he had sheet music booklets at times on a subscription basis, charging 24 reales per quarter year, every 90 days, with free shipping to the provincial areas of Spain. These were sold in 1855 before the Academia de Guitarra. Teaching activities began in 1857 at the Francisco Gonzalez Guitar Workshop on Calle Toledo 40 in Madrid. And they continued for some years, and eventually his son, Federico Cano, taught at the Francisco Gonzalez Guitar Workshop as well. It's been said that Antonio Cano was Francisco Tarraga's guitar teacher at the Madrid Conservatorio in 1875. At that time, Tarraga lived in a boarding house on Calle Jesus y Maria, and he would walk out every morning onto a street that had several guitar makers' workshops within 2 blocks of where he lived. Not to mention, less than a mile away was an adjacent street housing another dozen guitar workshops in Madrid. I should say that Jose Toboso Martin also owned a Taurus 10-string, and that these guys both stayed at the same pension on Calle Jesus y Maria. Mamo Viudis made a guitar that I have in stock at that same location, a block or so away, and we find 70 years later, Arcano Fernandez, now retired, but he worked at that location on the same street. The daily newspaper El Clamor Público on March 17, 1855, page 4, mentioned that published sheet music booklets at times were available on a subscription basis at the Casimiro Martin music store, Bernabe Carafa music store, as well as the Francisco Gonzalez Guitar Workshop. In 1838, Bernabe Carafa was a shop where you could get the Dionisio Aguado tripod for 8 to 100 duros. As well, later, the Diario Oficial de Avisos de Madrid on March 22, 1855, mentioned that the newest published sheet music booklets were now available. Before the advent of the Academia de Guitarra, which would be a guitar academy like we have all over the world today, at the Francisco Gonzalez Guitar Workshop, the daily newspaper La Nación, The Nation, on April 24, 1856, had a listing of a Antonio Cano guitar concert. You can see all these titles on the website. I'm going to put the website listings in relationship to this particular lecture that I'm doing today. And you'll be able to see in great clarity the titles, as well as the advertising and photos of the artists I'm speaking of. Also, his son, Federico Cano, performed duets with him at that concert. And amongst other acts on the bill, one act had 2 pianos. And the tickets to that concert were available at the Bernabe Carafa Music Store and the Casimiro Martin music store, as well as the hall of the conservatory located at the Teatro Real where the concert would take place. In the newspaper La Nación, on May 31st, 1865, it was announced that Tomas Damas was teaching at the Francisco Gonzalez Guitar San Jeronimo workshop. In the newspaper La Iberia, on June 1st, 1865, it was also announced that Tomas Damas was teaching guitar at the Francisco Gonzalez Guitar San Jeronimo location workshop. Tomas Damas published his method book in 1867, a few years later. The photo shown on the website is from the cover of that method. The daily newspapers of Madrid saw the ads for teaching taken out day after day to create the student base. The Diario Oficial de Avisos de Madrid from October 24th to 1857 to October 27th, 4 days in a row, had the same ad. The whole idea to create a student base. In this daily newspaper, Diario Oficial de Avisos de Madrid, on November 6, 1859, it was on this date that Antonio Cano announced that his son Federico would begin to assume the duties of the Academia de Guitarra. Some years went by. The need for advertising wasn't necessary once the student base was achieved. Then an announcement of the length of time the classes had been continuously offered was released in Diario Oficial de Avisos de Madrid, February 25th, 1861. So at that point they had been in effect for 4 years non-stop. As I mentioned earlier, that Tomas Damas started teaching there in 1865. Now I'm going to talk about Jose Ramirez shop. I started my website, which I'm reading this message from. In the days when there were 2-digit telephone numbers in Madrid, this was when Eduardo del Vando began teaching at the Jose Ramirez Guitar Workshop. Eduardo del Vando was friends with Javier Pintos Fonseca, born 1869, lived till 1935. The concert guitarist Eduardo del Vando was an Andalusian guitarist who played the duo with Jose Fola, written by Chueca y Blvd, entitled El Año Pasado por Agua, premiered in Madrid in 1889 by Tarrega, who had done the transcription. Under his influence, he arrived in Galicia, settled briefly in the city of Vigo, and met Javier Pintos Fonseca. I'm speaking of Eduardo del Vando, the guitar teacher in residence at the Jose Maria Concepcion Jeronima shop. In the daily newspaper La Correspondencia de España, October 23, 1893, Jose Ramirez placed his first ad advertising guitars, bandurrias, strings, as well as violin and double bass repairs offered. In the daily newspaper Diario Oficial de Avisos de Madrid, November 3, 1893, Jose Ramirez placed his new ad with a different font. More than likely, his maestro, Francisco Gonzalez, told Jose of the increased sales by having guitar teachers on the premises, because for over 15 years, Francisco Gonzalez had done so at 2 different locations in Madrid. And I wrote that more than likely Jose saw the teachers and students when he was an apprentice at the Francisco Gonzalez Guitar Shop in 1870. In the daily newspaper La Justicia, November 15, 1893, Jose Ramirez placed his new advertisement with a different font. It was the third different newspaper he advertised in within 3 weeks. Now, also in Madrid, Agustin Andres, on November 1st, 1902, Rafael Marin, who published his method book of flamenco guitar that year, opened his Academia de Flamenco y Clásico Guitar at the Andres Guitar Workshop run by Agustin Andres. In the newspaper El Liberal, on December 1st, 1902, we see that as well in the El Heraldo newspaper de Madrid on the 2nd of December, being the next day, it mentions that there is such a demand by Miguel Llobet's admirers for a second concert to be held on December 3rd, 1902 at La Comedia Theater, that tickets were available at the Andres Guitar Workshop. Agustin Andres, the owner. Master guitar maker Santos Hernandez says he was at this concert in his 1943 interview. He quoted the image. The quoted image is a translation by my colleague Richard Brunet from Wakanda, Illinois at the present time. From his 2007 Vintage Guitar article in the Guitars with Guts column, 1943 Santos Hernandez interview made just a few weeks before he passed away, less than 90 days. 2 weeks after the Miguel Llobet concert in the El País newspaper, December 17, 1902, there is a different ad for the Agustin Andres shop showing that he had Ruffini brand high-grade strings. Apparently they were counterfeited, as he also had certificates of authenticity that came with the purchase. In this daily newspaper, El Liberal, December 21st, 1902, we see the text is written in the Vosotros conjugation used in the church, in the Bible, as well as in the street. At the end of the mention of the Christmas season, it is also stating, "Come see the exposition of guitars dedicated to Francisco Tarraga, today, Sunday." In the newspaper El Liberal, January 26, 1904, the ad states, "The great Tarraga says this is the best guitar maker's workshop in Spain." As I mentioned, you can see these images on my website, finefretted.com. I will provide the links to these pages so you can directly check them out. A multitude of images as well as photos of the artists that I'm talking about. In the newspaper El País, October 26, 1904, there's an ad for the Rafael Marin flamenco guitar method with 2 addresses to acquire it, the second being from the publisher. In the El País on May 7th, 1905, Moderna becomes Modernista. He had Guitarreria Moderna, Guitarreria Modernista is the shop name, with Taurus brace guitars and old guitars now available mentioned at the bottom of the advertisement. Agustin Andres eventually had advertisements mentioning he would ship desired guitars to the provinces of Spain as well as overseas. In 1908, he went to Paris and worked alongside Julian Gomez Ramirez and Malmo Rodriguez Perez, fabricating high-grade guitars at Rue Puteaux 7 in Paris. Both Julian Gomez Ramirez and Malmo Rodriguez Perez had been working for Agustin Andres in 1905 in Madrid. The Agustin Andres Guitar Workshop placed its first advertisement in the daily newspaper El Liberal on August 13, 1902. The next day, in a different newspaper, August 14th, his new ad appeared in El Imparcial on August 14, 1902. A month later, in the newspaper La Correspondencia de España, September 17, 1902, he carried the same ad. On the same day, his ad ran in El Heraldo de Madrid, September 17, 1902, he carried the same ad. Again, on the same day, he altered his ad a little bit in El Imparcial on the 17th of September 1902. You can see these images and the variations that they have on the website, finefretted.com. On this day in the daily newspaper, El Imparcial, September 19, 1902, page 5, he announced that Rafael Marin on 1st of November 1902 would begin lessons in his Academia de Flamenco and Classical Guitar. You can also see a copy of the cover to the Rafael Marin method book on the website. A month later, in the daily newspaper El Heraldo de Madrid, October 21st, 1902, just 10 days away from the inauguration of the music school, he placed the same announcement. 3 days later, in La Correspondencia de España, on October 24th, 1902, and in El Liberal, he repeated the same announcement. The inauguration is stated in the newspaper El Imparcial on October 29, 1902, and on the day before it opened in the El Heraldo de Madrid, October 31st, 1902. In the daily newspaper El Heraldo de Madrid, October 31st, 1903, is the first ad in months mentioning the Academia of Guitar with the price of 7.5 pesetas a month tuition. In the line 1 of the ads, it states the soundboards of the guitar and the bandurrias are varnished. In the daily newspaper La Correspondencia de España, September 22nd, 1903, it mentions the expanded educational activities by the Academia of Guitar to include bandurria with the same price of 7.5 pesetas for a month's tuition. In the newspaper El Imparcial on October 12, 1903, it mentions the expanding educational activities of the guitar and bandurria, adding mandolin and laúd, being the same tuning but an octave above the bandurria. At the end it states, coming soon, a free illustrated catalog. I want one of those catalogs. We all want one of those illustrated catalogs, don't we? In the Heraldo de Madrid on October 13, 1903, it says repairs are offered for violins and harps, quite a wide range for a guitar maker and restorer. Italian mandolins from Naples are now available. In the El País, October 19, 1903, there are prices for most of what is sold in the larger ad. In the El Liberal, December 20th, 1903, in the headline, it suggests to the customer, buy where the instruments are made, which gets you the best price. When these instruments are wholesaled, they go for higher prices in the stores that buy them wholesale than buying it directly at the Fabrica, at the workshop. In the Almanac Bailey Bailier, in 1904, page 485 is an advertisement with the owner's name, Agustin Andres. In the Directorio Madrileno, 1905, page 1416, there is a large 1/3 of a page ad. So to recall, in 1857 into the 1860s, we had Antonio Cano, his son Federico Cano, and later in 1865, Tomas Damas, offering lessons at the Francisco Gonzalez workshop. Later on, we see Jose Ramirez has Eduardo del Valdo in 1893 teaching guitar at his workshop. In 1902, we see Rafael Marin starting to teach November 1st at the Agustin Andres workshop, publishing his method book months later. It's a method book that thick. I've got it somewhere. I have about 55 to 60 feet of archives, probably 45 foot thick here at the store, another 15 foot thick of archives of all genres, be it violin, guitar, languages, you name it. So that's why I don't know where the Rafael Marin method book is.